Although I feel like I grew up. You know what I mean?
I came back and said.
Yeah. Haven't been now in a couple of years. No, that's fine.
All right, hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for being here today. I am like overjoyed right now. I had no idea we'd be this full this morning. So thank you for being here. My name is Callum Brown. I'm the Senior Director of Partnerships and Programs at the Nonprofit Center of Northeast Florida, where of course we exist to connect, strengthen, and advocate for a strong nonprofit community. Really just first thing, I do want to go around. I know there's a lot of us. Let's just keep it super brief, like 30 seconds, Callan, title, company. Would love to just, have everyone in the room hear who's in the room because, hey, you might not know. So let's go in the room first and then I'm sorry, Zoom folks, I won't forget about you and promise we'll do you next, okay? So I'm just gonna throw it to my colleague Deirdre.
Hey, everybody, Deirdre Connor with the Nonprofit Center.
Morning, everyone. Emmanuel Fortune with DRG Talent.
Good morning, Darren Finley, POC Management Services.
Morning, Ron. Good
Good morning, Michael Elias, Passing Lanes Building.
Good morning, I'm Josh Hirsch with Sukup Strategic Solutions.
And good morning as well. I'm Lori Price with Clarity Transitions.
Hi, Deanne Collins-Dockery with Partners with Nonprofit.
Hello, everyone. I'm Thomas Bullock with Genesis Ed Solutions.
Hi, I'm Dr. Joy Hervey with Genesis Ed Solutions.
Hi, Latanya Winhall, Winning Teams.
Morning, Charlene Rogers. I'm part of the Authors Roundtable.
Morning, Haley Teller, Navigator Salesforce Consultant.
Debbie Burgess, Deborah J. Burgess LLC. Very original, right?
Hello, I'm Libby Greenberg. I'm a Civic Technology Fellow.
Yeah, and she's at Florida Community Innovation with me, Caroline Nickerson.
Hey, everybody. Roger Griffin.
Hey, good morning, Brandon Sear, also Novus Insight.
Don Fan, I've been an interim executive resource for the last 7 years that started out as a one-year assignment.
Julia Burns, Clarity Transitions.
Katie Keene, consultant for Teen Lane Co.
Good morning, I'm Joanne Cohen and I am brand new, so I don't have a name except my own.
Good morning, I'm Chaz Runpola. I'm with Inspire Philanthropy.
I want to get our friends in the back.
Laura Seidelman, Florida Training Solutions.
John Daigle with Daigle Creative.
You're welcome. Dawn?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dawn Lockhart. I'm brand new too, but not new to the sector. So welcome and very happy to be here.
Doing quick intros. So my Zoom folks, do you want to take a chance and unmute? I see at the top of my screen, first my colleague Darian.
Darian Reynolds from the Nonprofit Center.
Jim?
Good morning, Jim Schwartz, Compass Development and Governance Group.
Hey, John?
Hey, good morning, everybody. John Ersling with Inspire Philanthropy.
Hey, Mickey?
Hey, everybody. Mickey Brown at Special Project Partners.
And Dominique?
Good morning, everyone. Dominique Ferreira Hawkins with Ahimsa Management Group.
And Alfreda?
Good morning, everyone. Alfreda Boney with PSC Consulting.
I can't see any more folks on my screen. Who else we got online?
Bridget?
Hi, Georgette Dumont, just my own consultant. Thank you. Oh, I'm with UNF as well.
Melanie?
Good morning. This is Melanie Cost with ACE Communications.
Alita?
Good morning, everyone. This is Alita Turner with Built to Rock Event.
And Brandy?
Hi, good morning. I'm Brandy Rawls. I have my own consultancy called the Nonprofit Blackboard, but I also serve as a Director of Finance and Operations for Feel Good Action based in Seattle, Washington.
Thank you. And then I think we had one friend that came in. Hey.
Hi, hello, Michelle Sharon Holly, HR people.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for doing that. It's so good to meet everyone, see everyone. So again, just welcome. We're so happy to host you today. A couple of quick just FYIs about why we're doing this. The last time we did this was actually in 2020 during the pandemic. We did a consultants meeting and, sadly we haven't done it since, but I will say that was such a great meeting to just hear from everybody what the trends are in the local nonprofit landscape, what challenges you all are experiencing working with nonprofit clients. And that's really partly why we're here today. It's just to hear from you. We really don't want to talk at you too much. We're not doing like a full-on presentation, but I know a couple of you were at our all-member gathering last week. So thanks for being there for that for Valentine's Day. But we are going to go over a couple of things that you might have seen there, which is just an update from our most recent membership survey to kind of give you an aha about what our nonprofit members, our 400 members, are saying about what they're going through, what they're experiencing in the sector. But first, the only other thing I just wanted to kind of ground us in is that the Nonprofit Center, what we really utilize to kind of, I would say, define our capacity building work is our Stronger Nonprofits framework. And so when we talk about our framework, it's 4 key pillars. And what does it mean to make a strong nonprofit and a sustainable one? And for us, that's high performing leadership teams. And for us, the leadership team is, of course, the executive and the board of directors. It is organizational learning and measurement. So really thinking about, the culture of our organizations and how we measure our impact and evaluate our success. It is external awareness and advocacy. So really, looking to the external environment and helping our nonprofits to understand that they can and should advocate for their mission. And then finally, it's access to capital. And of course, the money is the capital, but that could be also political capital, social capital, our human capital, the things that we need to really get the job done. So that's our Stronger Nonprofits framework. We're going to share more of that with you over and over again. But the other thing to that is that we are really, really investing right now in how we better understand diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. Better understand what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like in the sector. We know we've done a really a not great job at it the last so many years, right? So the Nonprofit Center is really working to look internally at our practices, our policies, our HR, our operations, and also our programs, and understand how can we better invest in what equitable practices look like, and then communicate that story, share what we've learned with our nonprofit members so that they can take real actionable steps towards improving their own practices around diversity, equity, inclusion, and really just belonging among the sector. Because what we don't want to hear is that people are leaving the sector in droves because they just don't feel like they belong and that they're not valued. And that's a huge, huge piece of it, is that human capital. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I'm actually going to pass it to Deirdre to do our member survey.
Hey, everybody. Raise your hand if you were here for all member gathering. Okay. So I'm gonna try not to retread a ton of ground, but we thought we could start the conversation today with really fresh data from what we're hearing from our member organizations. And then we'll have a little discussion about what in here is resonating with what you're seeing, maybe what surprises you have, and have some open conversation around the trends that we're all seeing in the nonprofit sector, so we can talk about some possible solutions. Okay. So our survey is something that we do either every year or 2 years, depending on what is going on. It was a representative sample. It's about 154 respondents to the survey. These are the service categories. So as you can see, the nonprofit center and the nonprofit sector in general is quite diverse in terms of the types of missions that organizations have. That bigger chunk is human services general, and our definitions for that have been fairly stable over time because we use that as well to do our state of the sector research, which is also happening this year. So we'll have some really good IRS data about the local landscape in Northeast Florida. Annual revenue, there again, we see quite a bit of diversity. And for the nonprofit center, we work with a lot of small budget size organizations, as well as, I would say, a pretty complete market share of some of the larger budget size organizations. But what we also find is that the needs that those organizations tend to have are very different based on their staff size, whether they have staff at all. So we do a lot of data cuts looking at larger budget size organizations versus smaller budget size organizations. And we say that because you can have a small budget size and a big impact. So we refer to the budget size just because that tells us more about how the organization operates and what it might need. We also are looking to better understand how many organizations in our community identify as BIPOC led, and we have a definition for that that aligns to, well, it's called Candid now, but it used to be called the Foundation Center. So this is actually very, I'd say fairly mirrors our community demographics in general of adults, not of children. So that's a little bit about kind of our membership base and who took the survey. These are helpful member resources. You're probably a little less interested in that, but I think for folks who are members of the Nonprofit Center, thank you. And I think that these probably mirror what our partner members and foundation members would say as well, which is a high degree of interest and usefulness of just interacting with staff. And just so you know, tell your clients and anybody who's a member, you can call us anytime. Sometimes people will like be surprised by that, but we love to hear from members and answer questions. Advocacy, staff training, resources, and e-newsletters, also helpful resources. So we always ask about top challenges that organizations are facing. And these were the top 5 this year. Meeting community demand for services. That is almost always in the top 5 because we know that our community is growing. We know that the needs of our community are growing. And so organizations always report that in the top 5, but I think this year it was number 1. Adapting our business model, operations, or strategy to the current environment. Changes in leadership, staff, or volunteers. We know that organizations, not just in the nonprofit sector, but everywhere, are experiencing high degrees of turnover and some hiring challenges. Volunteer re-engagement is also a big priority for organizations that depend on volunteers. The economic forecast, there's still a lot of uncertainty there, and the regulatory or political environment, and we heard a lot about that in the brief response as well, is that the regulatory and political environment for organizations has become drastically more challenging in the last few years. And that's really affecting probably all of these other things, whether it's meeting community demand, staff turnover, adapting to the current environment. Priorities that folks have, again, this one almost always lands in the top 5, but the vast majority of organizations say that they're prioritizing revenue development and fundraising. They probably should. And almost 3/4 are prioritizing that recruiting, retaining, and developing staff and volunteers. Slightly fewer prioritizing grant writing. And some of the things that we heard, this is like a themes analysis of our free response, but things that folks want from the nonprofit center in particular. Just helping them use their member resources, because folks will come to us and be like, you offer so much and I don't know where to start. So we're thinking deeply at the Nonprofit Center about how we help folks really prioritize and access the capacity building that's already available to them through our organization, as well as more intensive and individualized support for organizations individually. Sector-wide advocacy and representation, and then support for early life cycle stage organizations. We know that those are organizations with very specific needs. And we get a lot of folks coming to us, whether to come to our quarterly How to Start a Nonprofit training, which sometimes we joke should be called How Not to Start a Nonprofit, because we spend a good bit of time talking about, like, is this the right decision for you? As well as for folks who have decided to take the plunge, they do need quite a lot of support. Okay. That was a very quick landscape of what we're hearing from members. I have additional details, so if there are any questions about it, we can do a couple of the deeper cuts, but those are the broad themes, and I'll hand it back over to Callan to take us to our next steps and the questions.
Yeah, so really now what I wanted to do is just hear from you all, and I'm going to be taking some notes, so don't mind me. I'm not piecing out or anything. But I really just wanted to see if we could do just some around the room sharing around what are, kind of the big trends that you all are seeing as far as your consulting assignments or organizational needs. Like, what are you all hearing? What are you all experiencing a lot of with your clients?
I'll break the ice.
Yeah.
So for us, we launched a whole vertical of service for AI consulting. It's been a huge demand. We've been focusing a lot of our online education webinar and stuff about that. It's pretty wild. The power of what we can do with our clients and they're really responding to it. And anything from, strategic planning, fund development, we're working on a capital campaign with one of our clients. So there's a lot of potential.
It really vibed with me when you had the pie chart up around the type of work that's happening, and the largest slice was human services case management, which is overwhelmingly the request we're getting. Nearly all of the work that we've started in the last year that's been local has been human services case management. But the challenge that people are having is getting funding for capacity building and not framing that as overhead. We've been doing a lot of work with folks where we do like free scoping and help them build plans to support grant writing. There still seems to be an awful lot of trouble with people getting that funded in terms of this attitude of the valorization of scarcity and we can't have nice things because it's not appropriate for nonprofits. This sort of issue is something we've been collaborating with a lot of our folks on. And I would love to see more effort in that area to educate funders.
Us too.
Yeah. And I'm not forgetting about my online folks too. So if anyone has a hand raised or wants to unmute, please.
Yeah, I would just say that, what you said about new and fledgling nonprofits really resonates with us. We're getting more and more requests from folks who either have a nonprofit under development or a new one, and they just need some kind of hand holding. So we're working to develop, kind of some online learning around that for nonprofits, new nonprofits and fledglings. I'd also say that when it comes to capacity building, the issue that we're being called in to solve for is we are changing. We have new demands on our resources and we don't have the staffing. So it's almost like fractional, leadership that nonprofits are needing now. And we're trying to help meet that need. And then the third thing I would say is evaluation, right? So some of the larger funders now are moving away from building evaluation into like what they require for their grants, but that doesn't mean that the need doesn't exist. So it's almost like, how do we develop that capacity in nonprofits to do it themselves and teach them how to assess and to understand their data.
So I'm less than 2 years in it, but the majority of my requests have been leadership and building supervisor capacity. Just staff retention and being able to lead generational teams. The Gen X, millennials, Gen Y, and baby boomers all sitting around the table together trying to get along.
Yeah, I'll echo that. We've seen a lot of work in the management, leadership development, supervisory skill, right? And obviously that's in your mid to larger size nonprofits, but leveraging those sort of power people skills to actually get things done within the organization, because most folks don't come with that skill set. So we've had a lot of requests for, we've got all these people, what do we do with them, right? How do we get them all sort of flying in the same direction? So definitely in line with what our colleague said down there.
Jim Schwartz has his hand raised, and then Brandy.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Things I'm hearing, still board engagement. Hearing from a lot of boards where board members are showing up, but not really aware of what their responsibilities are, not really engaged in analysis of decisions, things like that. Also hearing board diversity. Back in 2020, really big focus on board diversity. Not a lot has happened from what I've seen. Some boards have had some really good success, but I think the majority of the boards are still struggling with that, and some have taken the focus off. And then the last one that I'm seeing a lot of is just board staff relations, where this may come with the big turnover in CEOs. The board trying to figure out how to work with the CEO. I've had calls from CEOs having a lot of issues with their boards. So just that relationship needing some work.
Brandy?
I kind of want to echo what Jim was saying. In my experience, I'm running into a lot of founder syndrome, especially when you have teams of a lot of Gen Z and millennials like myself who are coming in and kind of shaking up things. But then also on some of the grants that I'm on as a consultant offering TA, and I'm specifically working in social impact, reproductive space, social justice. A lot of these organizations come in with budgets under 250,000, but they're given multi-year grants, but it's mainly for programming or capacity building, but they don't come in with the skill set to understand how to utilize those funds. So I'm spending a lot of time in strategy, cash projections, basic budgeting. A lot of those skills are lacking. So that's where I'm at.
Lita.
I would from the event side, and I think this goes back to what Deirdre mentioned, fundraising is important. And as we all know, most nonprofits have to host an event in order to raise funds. And so I think that, you know, from an event standpoint, just making sure that the board and the executives know, you know, we have to have a budget for the actual fundraiser. And what does that look like? Because if you're hosting one event, how much money are you hoping to fundraise from that versus like events throughout the year? So I think that's important.
John?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing from a trend standpoint is just transitions are a big part of a lot of our engagements, you know, mostly led by staff turnover. You know, so you have development staff members that are either taking another position, an upwardly mobile position, or they're leaving for one reason or another. And then that creates sort of all these questions around, you know, are we performing well in development? Do we need to get better in fundraising? What's our next hire for this position? You know, so really kind of helping organizations with those transitional periods that are driven, you know, by high turnover rates, you know, has been a trend that we've seen.
Yeah, Brandon.
So from the perspective of an IT MSP that was actually formerly a nonprofit. A few of the different areas that we see, you know, a lot of folks needing some help in, number one being probably IT risk management. There's just a very changing landscape right now of sort of what nonprofits, what all organizations really need to be concerned with as they operate. And another big area that we see is kind of IT strategic direction when it comes to capacity building and also how technology can serve mission. You know, a lot of nonprofits see technology sometimes as an obstacle or just like as a thing they need to do. But how do they turn that conversation around and make it more, how does technology help us, you know, do the work we're doing and support the mission?
When we come back to foundational skills, we'd really like to see people inside of nonprofits have. Something that never gets discussed, and I run into this in almost every single engagement, is foundational understanding of quantitative logic. So you can't really design good metrics and build them into your processes if you don't understand base level concepts in quantitative assessment. We're spending a lot of time remediating that, which we're happy to do, but strikes me as a sector-wide area that some investment would make a big difference in terms of strength of metrics we can all get from folks we're collaborating.
Yeah, leaning into some of the technology and operations side. So I work with marketing communications and really have leaned into what I consider marketing operations. And I think there is a big gap between the connection of how valuable these tools and technology and resources can be to open up city for team members to do their jobs and things like that. So I think I have a difficult time because what happens every time I come in and work with an organization, they may hire me for marketing communications, but every single time I'm setting up some foundational tools for helping the team help themselves. And so I've been separating out kind of like services for that because it's just an ongoing need. Really even an opportunity to hand that off to team members. So I think I think for me, it would be easier to, you know, leaning into that, like what you were sharing about technology serving the mission, bridging that gap to communicate that. And I think that make a big difference.
To share a positive trend, I've been seeing clients build community listening into their process for programs, which has been really, I think, cool. Maybe a post-COVID impact with all the like recent social justice conversations people have been having the past few years, but community listening has been a really positive thing to see.
And one quick question, leaning into the technology side. I wasn't gonna bring up the topic of AI. I was kind of curious. And I'm happy that you brought that up because it's could change so many things in a positive way.
We add the dimension of AI ethics in there as well.
Yeah,
That's what we're
great.
hearing. Yeah, ethics around AI.
Yeah.
There's a really good study that recently came out from the Guri think tank about that on the use of AI in fundraising. So between that and then fundraising.ai are the two frameworks that I use whenever we're working in that area. I mean, anytime I'm working with a client or presenting, I lead with ethics because it's where we need to be.
Yeah, I think education on that is a foundation, and then also where I'm coming from as far as the operational side of the teams is building AI bots to help us.
Yeah, so
It would be another employee or support tool for.
building off of that, that's exactly what we've done. So we've designed custom GPTs for different departments, not only within our organization, but we'll create brand personas for our clients. It's pretty wild. It's fun.
Yeah, it was fun, anyway.
Nerd stuff.
Yeah.
But the products are
It's not
there.
new stuff, it's now stuff.
It's so now.
Yeah. And it's not like a trend that's gonna go away anytime soon. It's something that as years go on, it's gonna become like in third-party tools and everything, it's just going to be not a need and not a want, but it's just a everyday part of your operations.
It's increasingly embedded in the applications people are using now, and if they don't have a plan for it, they have a plan, it's just terrible.
It's already there. It's
Yeah,
already
they
happening.
already have it.
In the last month, I mean, in the next 30 days, it's gonna be even bigger. But I think, I mean, if you think about it, applying it to an organization, so maybe you have hire a copywriter, this could be like your assistant copywriter, something like that, just things get churned out. Your graphic designer could help. And that there's so many elements to it that could be leveraged.
And for folks that are maintaining operations on the same database as they are fundraising and bar ops, those same AI engines are there touching their operations and their clientele data set.
Strategize the communication.
Yeah, building off of what you said, I always encourage our clients to develop an AI usage policy. That way there's guardrails and no gray area to really operate within.
But for starters, don't put your fingers into your ears and ignore it.
I think this conversation too kind of raises the equity conversation again, because on the, not so much on the consultant side, but on the supportive grant maker side, I'm just seeing a lot of siloing, and this could be a regional thing, but where do organizations, especially smaller organizations, go to understand kind of the landscape of what's available to them? In this space, I don't think that we've solved for that in Jacksonville yet. When you look at, private investors, government opportunities, and the things that we do, I think there's still a gap in knowledge between your larger nonprofits and the smaller ones. And even based on geography and where they're located in the city, where their founders live, right? So how do we address that in a comprehensive and holistic way?
I think just something to add to that, one of the biggest challenges that we see sort of boots on the ground with a lot of nonprofits is, things like how do nonprofits that have overlapping services work together? How do we do ethical data sharing? How do we, manage referral chains where, especially social services are referring from one to the next, especially in Jacksonville, we have a lot of that going on. One of the things that, we're doing is, finding opportunities to use, data relationships, build systems that can, open source systems that are accessible, that are affordable, especially to the nonprofit sector, where we can do some of that, ethical and meaningful data sharing, to try to help, those social services overlaps, manage, clients through that process. It's a really big challenge that, not very many have stepped up to solve. So it's one thing that we've been really focused on. We're actually working with the Kids Hope Alliance in Jacksonville on that very topic. So it's a big thing that we're seeing.
I'd say we've talked about a lot of gaps around the table. So the gaps between it's a typical have not gap, but it's an equity gap. It's the large and small small size organizations. It's the AI gap, which is partly, I think, a generational gap too. And we see a lot of boards who are hesitant, and I think these are in more established organizations, the big organizations, is they're old white boards. And they're just hesitant. And I still have board members say, what's DEI stand for again? Where, you know, have you been? And certainly AI is not gonna come together for these boards that are really conservative. And then you've got staff members who are way out in front. You've got organizations who are doing community listening, who, you know, in their strategic planning are never gonna talk to a funder, but they'll talk to the kids they serve. So I just, it feels like we're kind of moving in different directions, and we're gonna evolve some of these organizations out, perhaps, maybe rightfully. But it just feels like we're sort of at a turning in some in the
I
sector.
think that's, I wanted to bring up some, this, the history, right? So in program development and board development, leadership development, kind of contextualizing what organizations are doing in light of the history, right? So I think what I'm seeing now is that even with organizations that are kind of forward moving and progressing, there's like this blind spot, which is what has already happened in the community where you're working, right? And you're not coming into a vacuum or a blank slate, right? And so that's a blind spot that I think is kind of catching up with some organizations. And if we can help, especially boards, get ahead of that curve and understand kind of the history and the context that already exists around their work, you know, then maybe that can help open up, you know, some new ways of
Boards
working.
hold organizations.
What'd you say, Julie?
Boards hold organizations back sometimes.
That brings up the whole other opportunity of how to change the governance model for the future.
There's that.
Yeah.
It is interesting though, like to the point of problem definition, we do see that even in our trainings when we're doing logic modeling, is like getting folks to state the problem, clearly state the problem that they're trying to solve with their programmatic work can be like super challenging, especially for organizations that have been around for a long time. It's a new or a brand new program or a brand new organization, and oftentimes that problem definition is a little easier, but even just getting folks to say the reason we are doing this is sometimes surprisingly difficult.
But the governance problem, and this is actually, we're a group who, because we talk with boards so much, I think we have an opportunity to raise questions. Is so we've got a huge amount of social expectations on what boards do, but boards' actual legal requirements are really small. They don't have to do a whole lot. Yeah, and so because there have been some national models around, it does not mean that that is the right model for every single nonprofit. And I think it's helpful for us, and we do this, though everybody, sometimes not everybody, we give this look like, what do you mean? Like, what does the board for this organization need to do for this mission? You know, it doesn't mean you need to do all 10 of board sources, whatever they are. So I think we could raise the question consistently with boards about what is your value and what do you do, and not what are the social expectations of the last board you set.
I appreciate you saying that, Julia, because I think that as I'm listening to the group, I think that there's an opportunity for the collective whole to align around some of those critical focus areas to lift the sector up to create impact. I mean, at the end of the day, that's, you know, why we're here, is to create the impact. And one of the things I haven't heard, although Brandon, you mentioned it a little bit, was the alignment of the public sector, the private sector, and philanthropy around common approaches that create greater impact. And somehow we have to harness that energy because the organizations that we're working with are getting directives from all three sectors and trying to create the impact. And so how do we align all three sectors so that we have consistency about what the expectations are?
You haven't figured that out yet.
Well, actually, I'm working on it. I think,
Challenge.
it's a challenge because everybody speaks in different languages and uses different words to talk about the impact. And one of the things that I worked on when I was in the city was the development of 10 goals. Transition that to the nonprofit center has done some amazing work in development of some indicators around 6 goals that embody sustainable development goals, the community goals framework, many other initiatives for the chamber, et cetera. And I think, how do we collectively have a conversation about moving together in order to activate the work is really important. So one of the things that the Nonprofit Center is going to be doing is hosting community convenings around those 6 goals to bring together the public, private, and philanthropic sector. We'll be talking about some data, and I think this is in another part of the agenda, so I'm jumping ahead.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. Because of all the things that we're talking about, we can continue to do more strategic plans, more, all the fundraising, all that sort of stuff. But if we don't find a way to align around common goals as the public, private, and philanthropic sector, we're just not going to create the lift that the communities that we're serving must have. And so one of the things that you're going to hear about, and we did announce at AMG, was the launch of 6 convenings around 6 categories. And I know I'm going to say them wrong, but if you want to pull them
Screen
up.
share, yeah.
So we're doing a ton of indicator work, which Deirdre can talk with you more about in a little bit, but these are the 6 categories, and we're going to be convening organizations, funders, the private sector who are also doing work. When you think about the private sector and all of the different social responsibility strategies that they're working on, they're not connected and aligned. They are doing important work, but they're not aligned. And so we are taking on the responsibility and the opportunity of aligning the public, private, and philanthropic sector around these 6 categories. It's a natural space for us to be in. And so you'll be hearing more about that. The second thing that we're launching into is in the area of shared services. Many of the things that, especially for small and emerging organizations, they don't have the capacity to have solid HR practices, accounting services, all of the things that are critical to ensuring that an organization has the capacity to be successful and apply for, receive, execute on the grants and resources that they're provided in order to create the impact. And so we believe these are 2 areas that the Nonprofit Center naturally can be a leader in. We've had a lot of our members ask for this for quite some time, and there are quite a few member service organizations in the country who are doing great back office shared service initiatives that we believe we can help to lift the sector. So FYI.
The one thing I'll just add to that is, when it comes to alignment between those 3, government and philanthropy and nonprofits, that's already happening in some cases, but it tends to happen sort of not in public, and it tends to happen only with certain organizations. And what it does to make some of these goals and broader conversations accessible to everyone is it at least a step toward ensuring that everybody has sort of a fair shot at understanding what it is we're all trying to do together, and then accessing support to be able to do that.
I think then the last thing I would add is that from an advocacy perspective, one of the things that really is continues to really concern me, and we're trying to figure out what is the sweet spot for advocacy for the Nonprofit Center. And that is, if we don't retain the talent in the sector, all the things that we are challenged with trying to help organizations achieve aren't going to happen, because we don't have the talent pool to create the impact that we need in order to be able to affect change. So how do we retain talent? How do we attract talent? What are the barriers that are preventing organizations from ensuring that they're attracting the talent necessary to create the impact that is a must in this community. So as we listen to what each other's talking about, I really want to kind of center around what are those things that we all can agree on that elevate the sector in a way so that when we're each going out, whether collectively or individually, we're advocating for the same thing. So we become the team to advocate for best practices.
We find that a lot. There's a desire for organizations, they really want to build bench strength, they want to build pathways for advancement. But they're so caught up in the putting out the fires of the daily work that they don't have the organizational capacity to kind of do a deep dive in that area.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was just gonna say, kind of adding to what you were saying, you know, one of the things that we struggle with making an impact from our perspective and, you know, making positive change with addressing a lot of the challenges I mentioned earlier is finding sort of thought leaders in the nonprofit community to kind of represent what that change could mean from a nonprofit perspective. Obviously, we're a little bit from the outside coming in. So a lot of the things that we are working on is trying to establish things like data collaboratives and try to create funding initiatives where organizations will kind of reach out and request from funders a more community-based initiative or effort around a certain, around maybe cybersecurity or policy development or things like that that are really impactful to nonprofits that nonprofits often think they can't have access to funding for, or it's just too iterative and it's too something that just is sits on the shelf as something we'll get to it, but trying to help nonprofits address that from a community perspective, now rather than putting that off.
In terms of retention and recruiting people into the sector and retaining them in the sector, quality pay, path roads to advancement, all those things I'm sure will be discussed. Quality of tooling. I think it's overlooked.
Quality of what?
Quality of tooling. So that how people are equipped to do their jobs, the investments that are made, and again, I'm gonna go back to that fighting the culture of scarcity issue and giving people good tools to do their jobs communicates that we value the work that you do and want you to have as much impact as possible.
So on the talent piece, Don, that you mentioned, when I think about that, I think there's an element that has to do with like personal wholeness that I think about and meaningful work. And so there's this, I don't know, I guess it's a season of a lot of mental health crises, a lot of pain and suffering from a number of different dimensions, whether it's political context, interpersonal strife, lots of wars and conflict. And there's a way that people are learning to deal with and relate to suffering. So I think there's some healing work that needs to happen. A part of what I do, like I've been focused a lot on personal transformation coaching, in addition to the sort of technical talent side and merging the two. And I know like in this community in particular, there've been efforts like healing circles, which, Julia and others in the room have participated in. There have been other efforts to kind of merge this sort of personal growth and competency development. And I think regardless of what generation it is, there's gonna have to be like a way we address that personal wholeness component and sort of the talent side.
As I think about attracting and retaining a talent pool, as well as this idea of shared services that the nonprofit center can provide, one of the barriers that I see with a lot of small nonprofits, emerging nonprofits, but also established nonprofits that are just very small, is that they can't offer the benefits package to get people, to come and to stay. And so is there, an ability to have like a pool group that where people could get through the nonprofit center or elsewhere could get that?
I want to go to Brandy real quick, who's had her hand raised.
Thank you. I wanted to touch on a few things, especially in the current space that I'm in. I'm gonna be super transparent with this room. I'm leaving the current organization that I'm with for some of the reasons that were just recently stated about where our leadership stands on war conflicts in the world, ethics around donor relations and being aligned with the donor versus the purpose of the organization and the impact that we said we were going to do. And I currently have an offer on the table from an organization who is very valued aligned for me. And the offer is doubling my comp. The packages for benefits is something that I've never seen in the nonprofit sector before, with a double-digit contribution to a 401k plan after a year vested, fully covered medical and dental and vision, training opportunities, and I'm coming into a place where leadership is aligned with that and is interested in my growth as a professional, and long-term stability in this sector. Um, as a millennial, that is something that speaks to me wholeheartedly. It's nothing for me to leave an organization if I'm not valued aligned, especially in the current space that we're in the political space and in diversity in the workplace. While our staff is diverse, our board is very much older, and there are a lot of politics on our board that our staff is not aligned with. Unfortunately, we're in a place of a reckoning, if we could say. There's a lot of shaking happening in my organization, especially in the space that I'm in the electoral, getting out the vote space. It's a very challenging time for us. So I think offering a valued aligned space with a lot of the root work that goes into mental health, the comp, of course, because the price of living is increasing, especially here in Jacksonville as well. Finding that balance between generations, the overall values of the organization, and making sure that you have valued aligned leadership with what you truly say your mission is as an organization. I think that is what is at the heart of this conversation. And I think of what a lot of consultants can bring to the forefront when we're getting in these rooms with these orgs, to get them to understand that that is a very important part when you're out here looking for employees.
I wish I had recorded that.
It is recorded, yeah, right. It's recorded.
Yeah.
To mention too, in terms of value alignment, that it could be that the faith communities are an underutilized resource, right? When it comes to attracting talent, recruiting, even some of the things that Emmanuel talked about in terms of doing that spiritual work, spiritual largely written, not religious, but I think that's a way, creating these partnerships would be a way to, number one, get to the talent, the people who are looking for opportunities to align their career with their values, but also to reach those founders or prospective founders who need services, right? Because a lot of them are aligned with faith communities, and that's a way to get information to them. So, so I just wanted to offer that.
Does the NPC have a stance on organized labor in the sector?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so. I don't know.
There's not a ton of, I don't think there's a ton of unionization in Jacksonville in particular. If anybody knows if that's changing, that would be great information for us to have.
So the conversation is interesting because I think about, as a country, we have really advocated authentically for the education field. Still room to grow. We have authentically advocated for the nursing medical profession. Still room to grow. But there has been this acceptance that the social service sector pool of talent just continues to do what they do. And because they go to bed with their mission under their pillow every night and feel so fulfilled. And I think, definitely COVID opened the door. I mean, we all know what happened. This is an example with the situation in Jacksonville with the encampment, because Salzbacher and all the other nonprofits that were serving individuals experiencing homelessness had to reduce their service 50% in order to provide the social distancing. a shock to our system. So I really think that there's an opportunity for us as a collective whole, no matter where we're going in our own individual consulting, that we have some universal messaging that we pull together to advocate. And so I'm really intrigued in helping this group think about what that looks like, because, you know, if not us, who is going to advocate for the things that we're talking about? We can't do it individually, but we can do it together.
I just want to say, you know, in terms of really advocating for DEAI initiatives, I worry so much about being in a state where that is under attack, and really across the country, where it's almost become a dirty word in some sectors to talk about DEAI initiatives. And so, you know, whatever we can do as a sector to help, you know, sustain that and lift it up, I think is really important.
Also, in terms of advocacy, and this may already be part of the platform, but you know, the data around geography when it comes to kids being lifted from poverty, that is really very zip code based. I don't know that we're talking enough about that, you know, and you know, I think when it comes to this social services sector, that's something that it's a conversation that almost anyone would be willing to have, you know, regardless of their, you know, political affiliation. And so that could be a tool in messaging that kind of helps to bridge some divides and have the conversation, you know, even
Well, that is a personal passion of mine. Intergenerational wealth building. Hello. Everything.
The ways of getting at that, when I look at your six your pillars there, if there are benchmarks of goals that we're trying to set for each of those pillars, then we look at your alignment of that public-private philanthropic sectors and ask, through asset mapping, where are those gaps? Who's not reaching those measures, and then coming up with strategies for the folks around the table.
Completely agree.
Oh, okay, so I see Alita has a hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I absolutely love the fact that you all are thinking about shared services, because when I was even at Leadership Jacksonville and I was like part-time there, that was something that was almost like a conversation, right? Like, how could I also possibly work with another person at the Jesse to support their communication? So I love that idea. And I do want to say that, you know, when we think about in the economic development sector, there's cooperatives. So I kind of see the shared services as the cooperative model, where people come together and they're buying or paying for a service, right? And it benefits everyone who is a part of that. So I do love what the Nonprofit Center has put on the agenda, and I'd be willing to, you know, come in and meet with anyone who wants to be on a committee for this. Because, for example, we have many nonprofits who are focusing on education or mentoring, and everyone has their separate fundraiser events for their organization. But what does that look like when we collectively get together and say, hey, look, all of us are working toward mentoring. We're gonna have a joint event to make a collective impact. There are young professional groups who do this, and they fundraise $50,000s of dollars in one night for multiple organizations. So I love that you all are talking about that, because especially for the BIPOC-led nonprofits, the smaller nonprofits, they need shared services. They need joint efforts for fundraising at events so that they don't take on the cost. It would be shared. So I love that. I'm willing to hop on the committee.
Got your name.
Actually, what is her, can I tell you, can I ask what her name is?
Alita Turn.
Thank you. Would we all be okay sharing kind of names, contact information, websites? I don't know if you have them all.
We will
or-
take care of that. Yeah.
I would love to.
This is not, we really want to convene you more frequently. We were thinking quarterly to twice a year, but it feels like maybe you all have some energy around convening more. So I'd love to hear what the frequency might look like.
Yeah, we're a pledge 1% company and we're actually at 10%. So, but all of our pro bono work, I'm literally flinging spaghetti at the wall. It would be far more satisfying to have that channeled into something centralized. I love the co-op idea, which is why I wanted to be sure I got her name. It would be really great for us to be able to say, here's specific windows where we know people have issues around their cloud-based security or their metrics or whatever, and to be able to put that into a place that raises up the city that just ultimately makes everything better. Yeah.
Excellent.
So being a contrarian.
Sorry.
The alignment makes total sense. The shared services make total sense. And so many nonprofits have been formed because people get left out. So how do we look at creating a shared something that's not prescriptive and keeps people out? Right, I don't know how to answer that, but.
I think that's kind of where I was trying to go with that idea around, faith-based spaces, and not that that's the only engagement opportunity, but it's really part of a larger conversation about engagement, right? And we're having this conversation in the city boards and commissions, we're having this conversation here, right? So how do we do a better job of reaching the people that are not already being reached? Because what we don't want is for the same people who always show up here to then have another meeting to go to, right? That's not the whole. So I really do think, that will require some deeper thinking.
So we don't have different impact in different zip codes, results.
How do we reach them?
All right, this has been like such a great conversation. I really do appreciate it. Dawn, of course, shared about the indicators and meetings we're doing around that, shared services. One thing I would also add to that is I just want to see how many of you participated in our community coaches program in the past? 1, 2, 3, anybody online? 4, so a couple of folks. So that's something that we have had at the Nonprofit Center for many years, but we have started to kind of lose our pool of coaches. And so that's another thing that's actually on the docket for us that we are trying to rebuild through support that we have with a grant, and just something that I want you all to think about, not just as far as shared services and the work that you're doing with clients, but we really need community coaches. With the talent issues that are in the sector, they really, really need just some one-on-one advice. Like, it can mean so much to folks to just sit down and have a conversation and hear from someone who's practicing, how did you do that? And how can I replicate that in my own work and in my own organization? So just to throw that out there, community coaches is another thing that we're really working to rebuild that program at the Nonprofit Center. And we need a new pool of coaches, and we need our old coaches to be resurrected. So those of you that have been there, thank you so much. But just know that we're going to be reaching out to you about that. Before we really close out the meeting, I just wanted to ask, generally, one more question around, what is it that you all do think that the Nonprofit Center should be doing? Like, is there 1 or 2 main things outside of what we've spoken about, or maybe in the realm of shared services, whether it's finances, operations, the comms, what is it that you all really think that we should be focused on in these next couple of years? Thanks. Yeah.
I think you should continue doing the board development. That's real key. People talk about it. I'm actually talking because I've been on the board for the Jackson Arboretum for about 8 years of governance now. But a lot of the issues that we're brought up on the board, they don't know. I look for people on the board who have passion for the organization first, not their name. Because typically anecdotally what I've found out is people that have the big name, the big dollars, they have a lot of money, don't bring the donors. It's the people that love the organization, their mission. So continue doing that, because that's been well for us.
Thank you.
I think guidance on the DEI piece is important, as we were saying. I know with our organization, we are starting a partnership with school districts, and our resource map has a category for LGBTQ resources, and we're concerned, it used to be a no-brainer, but But with recent political developments, we're like, are we putting people's jobs at risk? Can our organization still operate like this? Like, I think DEI and some guidance in this kind of difficult environment for nonprofits would be really helpful.
Mickey has her hand raised.
Yeah, Mickey.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just been listening, and I think it's really important for the nonprofit center to consider how to continuously support small nonprofits in particular with regard to best business practices, really focusing on the impact that they want to make and the processes that need to be in place in order to do that. I still find that there are many nonprofits that are either you're very focused on wanting to make the difference and not knowing how, or how to measure whether or not that's happening, or in a space where strategically you're trying to accomplish many, many things, but not having either the resources or the expertise in order to execute. And it seems to keep folks in this kind of mid space where you're existing, but you're not thriving, and you're ultimately not impacting the community as you would want. And it seems like to me that's very foundational kind of work, which I know is in some ways that you already do that. But I think that it's really, really important because, you know, listening to the conversation, we're business owners, we're seeing this differently than a nonprofit organization their goal is different, and they need to know how they can run the business but still make the impact that they want to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Mickey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hey.
So I really agree with all the conversation around AI and AI policies. I think it's a category, as someone mentioned, of a lot of intimidation for nonprofits, especially small nonprofits. And while I think everybody has rushed to develop AI policies, or they're in the process of developing an AI policy, I don't see a lot of information on how that policy is deployed throughout the organization. I think the policy just makes everybody feel better. We have this policy, but there's really no conversation around how to operationalize that and how we're actually going to use that at every level of the organization. So I think that there's an opportunity for the nonprofit sector to offer, you know, safe spaces where you can come and ask all of your questions about AI. And, you know, there's such a range of understanding about how it works. And, you know, so that's what I would say. Thanks.
The word that you use, safe spaces, I think is really important because that is the purpose of the community coaches program as well, is to really give a safe space for an individual to be able to ask those questions and get the support that they need.
I would just say advocacy was the word that came to mind when you asked, you know, what the nonprofit center should be doing, and really advocacy to two communities in terms of the audience. One is public officials, right, who have the purse strings when it comes to funding for nonprofits. So, you know, maybe even creating safe spaces for those individuals to kind of talk through the decisions that they're making. And then the other audience would be the philanthropic sector, and just really lifting up the need for unrestricted dollars for nonprofits, and just the huge difference that it can make in terms of sustainability.
Great, thank you.
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you, everyone. That really helps because, you know, we are a super small team at the Nonprofit Center. You know, so we can't do it alone. Like, we know, especially going forward with all of these big initiatives that are on our plate, we are gonna really, really be relying on consultant and external help. We need the help. We're saying that today. We need your help. So just a couple of things for follow-up, and I'll let Dawn, you know, say any final thoughts that she has as well. But we are going to be reaching out with a consultant survey please respond. I know serving is the most fun, but we just really want to learn more about your like individual unique expertises, you know, what your interest is in supporting any of these initiatives, such as shared services. We do have a pilot of a small nonprofit pool that we're going to be working with and funding, you know, specific to bringing in external consultants to help with those shared services for small nonprofits. So really, you know, interest there, interest in community coaching. And then also again, like how would you like to stay engaged? How often would you like to be engaged? I do think maybe like twice a year at least would be really helpful. Like I don't want to go another 4 years and not hear from this group. So at least twice a year, but know that it will likely be more frequent than that. We'll definitely be reaching out to you. So if there's no other final comments right now, just Dawn, if there's anything you want to say to close
Sure.
it up.
I think, again, what I've already said, you all are part of the team. And our job at the Nonprofit Center is to make sure that we're aligned and that we're activating the talent that's in this room for greater good. And so how we make that happen strategically as a team is going to be the work that we're going to be working on. That's, you know, the Nonprofit Center needs to be the back office to provide the support for the consultant expertise that's available to create the impact in our community. So you're going to hear more about what that looks like. Please, this is new for us as well to dive into that. If you have continued recommendations, reach out to any of us and let us know. But we are very serious about the alignment of the sectors in order to create greater impact. And so through shared services, including consulting, and through convenings of the 6 categories of indicators, we expect to work together a lot. So really appreciate your support. Love that you're all here, and really looking forward to doing great things ahead.
Thank you all.
And we'll share contact information out. If for some reason you don't want your contact information shared, let us know. Otherwise, we'll plan to share who's in the group.
Exactly.